Warning. Weird. この世の終わりへの旅, which translates to Journey to the End of the World in English, is a 2002 manga about... Wait, what is it about? At only 12 chapters long, you can easily complete it in a single reading session. It's a title which I have barely heard people talk about, but I believe it deserves much more recognition. It follows the story of our main character named... Wait, we never find out his name. You follow him as he goes on a wonderful, fun adventure where he becomes a pirate, meets different people, gets the love of his life, and goes back to his homeland as a hero. This is one of the most unique and distinctive mangas I have ever read, and in a lot of ways it doesn't even feel like a manga. It's even hard to figure out what category it fits inside. In one way it's adventure, in another way it's psychological, and in another way it's horror. On top of the varying categories, it doesn't fall short in terms of the amount of themes it incorporates. As our nameless main character sets up on his journey, he experiences politics, different types of religions, cannibalism, distrust, you name it. One of the most common stereotypes regarding manga and anime is that it's weird. While whether this is true or false is a completely different topic, Journey to the End of the World incorporates a completely different type of weirdness to its whole story. Regarding the plot, it's easy to dismiss it as a story about a man who gets bored with the mundanity of his life and decides to rebel. A plot used in other stories, mangas and films such as Falling Down or The World Is Mine. But Journey to the End of the World showcases this sort of tale in a very unconventional yet intriguing manner. So the main character clearly awakes in his consciousness, which apparently he had never done before. It was the first time that ever happened. This gives him a bad premonition. He tries to tie his shoelaces, but he realizes that he doesn't even know how to tie them anymore. His emotions and his shoelaces are all tangled up. He opens the door, but feels immense disgust, so he immediately closes it. The thought of going to work fills him up with despair. Going to work, returning home, is an endless, mundane cycle. He locks the door. He turns around to see that the streets he had grown familiar with had inexplicably branched out into many routes. So he marches forward. However, eventually, he becomes lost. He had only ever gone back and forth from home to work, and he never bothered to walk around town. For some reason, he knows for certain he would never go back to work. This makes him a little happy. He goes over to the riverbank and hops into a random boat, which he realizes has nothing in it to move it forward. The boat slowly gets dragged by the current. He suddenly becomes frightened by the idea that he is taken out into the sea. He says, "I was sick of living like this, being swept by the tides and currents." However, he opens up the lid in the center of the boat and discovers a large hole, exposing the water below. But he comes up with an excellent idea. He takes his pants and his boxers off, ties the boxers to the broken mast and decides to call the boat Boxer Maru. He proceeds to fit his lower half of his body into the hole and begins pedaling the boat forward. However, the currents are too strong and he cannot go towards his desired direction. A man's legs aren't made for pedal boats. A journey that has begun must be completed, so he keeps pedaling. He sees two people who he feels he might know. Looking over to their direction, he wonders, are they watching me? Laughing at me? He tries to keep pedaling forward, but the boat wouldn't move. It eventually starts to get dark, and he wonders whether he is going to spend the rest of his life there, endlessly trying to push the boat forward. This idea depressed him. The moon shined very brightly. Is this making sense so far? Of course not. But this is still nothing compared to how wild the preceding chapters get. So in chapter 2, we see the content of the main character's dream. He is the captain of a pirate ship. They go around the South Pacific and East China Seas, ruthlessly looting and slaughtering other crews, only to throw the pieces and feed them to the sharks. Consequently, The ship is always surrounded by bloodthirsty sharks swimming about it. However, improved engine technology enables the other boats to travel at much higher speeds, so it becomes impossible for his obsolete pirate ship to catch up to them. As a solution, he enslaves a bunch of rowers so that he could push his boat at a faster speed. But one day, his henchmen construct a building on the ship without his permission. When he questions them about it, they say that it was a necessary measure with the growing number of slaves. To this, the main character reluctantly agrees. As the number of slaves continued to increase, the ship transformed to a size reaching a stupefying level. Although none of the slaves neglect their duties, with the growing ship, the main character starts to feel a loss of control. It eventually becomes impossible for even his henchmen to overlook everything, so the veteran slaves become responsible for supervising the new slaves. Even a governing body gets established on the ship. Shops and even corporations started to appear, some of which he had no clue even if they were needed. Everywhere, new buildings continued to be constructed. It wasn't even a ship anymore, it was a city. His existence becomes forgotten. He almost becomes a character in a fairy tale, so he spends his days fishing without anything else to do. Democracy was implemented, and the hordes of sharks had disappeared, except for one enormous shark, which still swam close by. He looks towards the shark and thinks about how it will meet its fate. Fish never stop growing. They continue growing larger and larger, until their bodies decay. A steady march forward to death. One day, the ship ceased being a ship and became something else entirely. It sank. However, this is only the second chapter. At the start of chapter 3, the main character finds himself awake, washed up onto a beach, where a bunch of cannibals are waiting. At first glance, the most captivating and gripping part of this manga is its artwork. It has a very uncanny, unorthodox appearance to it, which gives you a sense of eeriness as you flick through the pages. You have probably heard the term surrealism before, but a lot of you may be unsure what it actually means. Surrealism was an art movement that started out in the 1900s. Largely influenced by Freud's theory of the unconscious mind, one of the core ideas of surrealism was that it rejected logic. Surrealism puts together unconventional things that contradict and don't make sense upon first glance, often being compared to things like dreams and hallucinations. It makes sense emotionally, but not rationally. Freud comes into this picture because surrealist artists thought that by making these unconventional, unorthodox artworks, the interpretations and creations of it could give us further insight into our subconscious mind. Journey to the End of the World achieves this surrealist feeling through two fundamental ways of storytelling. First, through its art style, and then through the story itself. From my experience, I can't think of a better artist who deserves this surrealist title more than the authors of this manga, Nishioka Kyodai, which is the pen name for the two siblings who co-authored this work. I have previously heard titles like Uzumaki and I Am a Hero being associated with surrealism, but no, this is surrealism. Nishioka Kyodai have a very unconventional style that eschews the traditional presentations most manga readers are accustomed to. One common trait across mangas is the use of exaggerated facial expressions to show off different emotions. However, Journey to the End of the World completely abandons this trait, as a lot of characters don't even have faces, and the ones that do hardly change expressions at all. And in some ways, this leads you, the reader, to decide and interpret what they are feeling throughout the different events. And during the scenes that the characters do show off an obvious emotion, the characters' actions and their body language are relied upon to express their inner states. Just as much as the artwork, as you have probably realized earlier, the story itself is surreal and bizarre. The tale starts out with our nameless main character getting sick and tired of the typical, repetitive lifestyle he has been trapped into. As alluded to earlier, so many unexpected, outlandish things happen one by one. The main character becomes a pirate, but then he gets stranded on an isolated island inhabited by cannibals. However, he is the one person spared from being eaten, and instead, he is welcomed by the tribesmen, only to be told the mythology of the tribe by the Grand Elder. He later escapes from the tribe with a woman, but he somehow finds himself lost in the desert, so he proceeds to eat her. No, I'm not even kidding about that part. While these things do seemingly happen randomly, it still feels like there is some overall narrative to it, which makes everything curious and the reader interested. While Journey to the End of the World is a manga that I recommend to everyone, I wholeheartedly understand that it's definitely not for everyone. A lot of readers will be frustrated with the lack of clear direction in the narrative, but at the same time, this is most likely what the authors, Nishioka Kyodai, had always expected.